out of storage. JPL was ready with the upper stages, a cluster arrangement of miniaturized Sargent missiles. JPL was also responsible for communications, transmitting data from the satellite and capturing it on the ground.
Both transmitters operate continuously throughout the orbit, and each will carry 4 simultaneous channels of telemetering.
Besides telemetry, Henry Richter had another assignment: installing the science payload onto the satellite. The primary instrument, a cosmic ray detector, belonged to James Van Allen of the University of Iowa. JPL needed his permission to load the instrument on board, but he was nowhere to be found.
Van Allen was unavailable at that time to get permission. He was on an icebreaker down in the South Pacific launching balloons. And Dr. Pickering tried for a day through Navy communication channels to get in touch with him without luck. So he went to Western Union and got a telegram back in 3 hours. So tells you something about military communications.
In the midst of this scramble, another problem cropped up. Unbeknownst to JPL, von Braun was working on his own satellite.
General Medeiros, the commander of the program, is sort of betwixt and between. He has 2 powerful, brilliant scientists, or at least one scientist, one engineer, von Braun and Pickering, at loggerheads. And in a dramatic gesture, which illustrated beautifully Medeiros's leadership qualities, he took Pickering aside and just quietly talked to him while von Braun cooled his heels and had to wait. And they had a conversation, the Army general and the Caltech scientist, and then returned. Whereupon General Medeiros informed Dr. von Braun that Dr. Pickering and JPL would be providing the satellite. Von Braun was not pleased, but he knew how to take orders. And the result of that decision by Medeiros was that the Jet Propulsion Laboratory got into the spacecraft business.
When Medeiros said yes to Pickering, he set in motion the future for JPL. It was the direction Pickering had envisioned for some time, turning away from weapon systems to building spacecraft that would explore the heavens.
Minutes click past relentlessly. The beams of powerful searchlights light up the missile. Truly the star of one of the greatest suspense dramas of our time. The drama approaches the final act, the Army's first attempt to fire a man-made moon into orbit. Time, late evening, Friday, January 31st, 1958, in a blockhouse at Canaveral. The countdown to Explorer 1.
Roger. Okay, we'll start now.
Finish fuel loading.
Given the debacle of Vanguard, Washington was intensely involved in how this new launch attempt would be portrayed. Medeiros believed the White House was intentionally de-emphasizing the Army's role in its dictation of every aspect of the publicity plan. The general was to be at the Cape to oversee the launch. Pickering, Van Allen, and von Braun were assigned to the Pentagon. If the satellite reached orbit, the 3 men in Washington would announce the news at the National Academy of Sciences. In keeping with Eisenhower's desire to portray America's satellite as civilian in nature as possible.
Range safe. Range safe. Roger, Joe. 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Firing command. Firing command.
So we got a report from the Cape that the launch looks pretty good, and it should fly over California at such and such a time. And so the decision was made that we would make no public announcements about the rocket until it had actually been picked up in California. And so we sat there for an hour and a half. The time came and went, and there was a period of 8 minutes there, which were the longest 8 minutes I ever spent in my life.
What happened was that the jet stream had boosted it into a higher orbit than had been predicted, and so it took a little longer to begin to get the signal, and so everyone is extremely tense during this time, because now the Vanguard program has had its failures. JPL and Huntsville are now carrying the flag, so to speak, and it's not clear. It's not clear for sure if this is going to work or not.
More agonizing minutes went by, but finally JPL received the signal that the satellite was in orbit. The United States had a success, but not an official name for the satellite. The card-playing JPLers had unofficially called the project Deal. Highball was Medeiros' choice. The Pentagon rejected the gambling and liquor illusions in favor of a more lofty concept: Explorer. Eisenhower, on a golfing trip at the time, was awakened from his sleep and told the news. "Let's not make too big of a hullabaloo over this," he cautioned, and went back to sleep. No one took the president's advice.
We were told that there was going to be a press conference over at the National Academy of Sciences on the other side of the river. So off we went, and I remember sitting in that car with the three of us in the back seat. It was sort of a cold, rainy January night in Washington, and I remember a conversation going along, well, I wonder whether anybody's going to be out here, because it's now about 2 o'clock in the morning, you see.
In Washington, at the National Academy of Science, a packed auditorium of reporters, radio...
Von Braun, Van Allen, and Pickering are there to lift the satellite aloft. It is interesting that the Army isn't there in that picture. And that's an indicator, in a sense, of what's to come.
The question is, has any form of life been placed in the satellite? I think I could answer that one almost myself. Not intentionally.
Maybe we have a Florida cockroach inside, we don't know.
The Explorer launch brings us back to a measure of parity with the Soviets. It's not complete, but at least we have now demonstrated that we can put something into orbit as well. The success of Explorer and what we learned from it really does kind of recreate in the most fundamental way the nature of the Jet Propulsion Lab, and moving it from a rocket development center to one in which space science becomes what it really does. It really put JPL on the map scientifically.
The day following the launch of Explorer, newspaper headlines across the country gave testimony to a relieved and grateful nation. Back in Pasadena, there was a modest celebration in the laboratory's cafeteria. Later, Vice President Nixon would pay a visit to the lab for a photo op with the satellite. In a way, Explorer 1 was beginner's luck for JPL. Explorer 2 fell short of reaching orbit when the JPL-supplied fourth stage failed to ignite. Explorers 3 and 4 were successful, but as if to give warning to how difficult exploring the new frontier of space would be, the fifth and final Explorer also failed to reach orbit. But the 3 successful explorers would